Oh, there's the
Or
robot.
there's the robot, ironically enough, and we begin. If we may, we'll start with some quick introductions. Marianne, I'll pass it to you just to begin us there.
Hey, I'm Marianne Weems. I'm the artistic director of the Builders Association and one of the founding members.
Thank you. And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to pass it to Mo.
Oh, hi, I'm Moe Angelos, and I am a company member and performer in the Builders and in Atlas Drugged, which is what we're talking about today. And now I'm popcorning it over to you, James.
All right. I'm James Gibbs. I'm a writer and company dramaturg with the Builders.
Beautiful. Thank you all. And I'm Rubén Polendo. I'm Associate Dean for the Institute of Performing Arts here at Tisch. I'm also, yes, whoop, whoop. I'm also founding artistic director of Theater Me Too, a company equally committed to technology innovation and obsessed with the builders. I just have to say, I'm literally holding my builders book with me right now, just to, here's my obsession. It's a great joy to be in this conversation with you all. I will say again on a personal note that the work of the builders, the inspiration that we as a company, that I as artists have gotten from it, and how moved I have been by really seeing this modeling of not only the subject matter and technology as both a space of critique and material and an engagement, but also just the company modelness of it, right? To be in this ongoing conversation is really moving to, again, myself as an artist and also to us as a company. We've also had the great privilege of having you in residence at our space at Me Too 580, which we love it when you're there, and has been a great a privilege to see some of the process and some of the work. And so, I have a few sort of bullet point questions, but they'll travel us to wherever they head us into. If I may, I'll start a little bit sort of big and then start really centering Atlas Drugged, which I can't wait to talk about more. As you choose who wants to address what, I'll let us decide in the flow. But one of the questions I'll begin with, when one sees the really richness and the layeredness of the work of the builders, it's very clear to me that it isn't a kind of one idea point, that it isn't, we're going to tell a story about this one thing. But in fact, there's these multiple points of access. And so I imagine there's these multiple points of creation. And so for me, one of the questions that I get very excited.
Uh-oh. Ruben, you froze. Are you guys still there?
All the things.
So
So
fancy.
I think we might have glitched a little bit there. But going back a bit, I was sharing that one of the things that I'm most interested in finding out more about is, of course, about the process of making the work, which is this, to me, a multi-point, multi-axis work. And so one of my questions is about that journey of how, both as individual artists, but also as a company, you travel from a space of instinct, I'll call it, through a journey of exploration and creation into the crafting that ultimately becomes the work. And again, I recognize that's a giant and I imagine unique journey per work, but I'm just so curious, how the hell do you get there?
Well, I'll jump in and then these two will correct me. First of all, Ruben, I do want to say that we are huge fans. I'm a big fan of yours, and we are so grateful to have Theater Me Too as a base in New York, because you really are one of the few companies who understand what it means to be in a space with a bunch of technology and just work and not worry too much about, whatever stage management and, equity hours. I mean, we believe in equity. But anyway, it's a great privilege to just have the space and not have any of the other kind of administrative hassle that usually comes with that. So we're very grateful. And great to be in like-minded spirits in that room. So I will say briefly that the company has been around forever for, I don't know, we started in 1994, and the process has kind of been the same throughout, which is that there's a little core group of collaborators who all know each other very well and all have, I will say, a lot of expertise in their areas. So, media design, writing, performing, dramaturgy. There are only a few people in the room, but they're like high caliber. And I try to bring an idea to the space, and often, like in the last few shows, James and I have kind of hashed out something, or Moe and James have hashed out something and then brought it to the group. But in any case, it starts with a very simple, like almost a couple of sentences, and then gets layered and expanded. And as you say, it's associations. So everyone in the room brings their sort of like interpretation of the idea, which takes a long time to layer and level. And that's why the work ends up being so layered, I think, is because we take the time.
Yeah. James, Mo, any thoughts on that journey?
Yeah, just that, and that we try to bring in a process of sort of sketching along the way as much as financial restrictions allow. So that we do start just on Zoom or in a room talking, and then as much as we can, we try to have like a mini workshop, and even like sketch some video ideas if it's possible to do that. So that we're trying to move all the pieces forward at the same time,
Mm.
and not like lock down a script and then like get into a room and add the tech. So that's the most fundamental thing about the company, I think, is trying to push all the pieces forward at the same time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And let me just say, usually the script is the last thing to be finalized.
I mean, I love hearing that on a personal note, because I think it's what makes the text so vibrant in a lot of ways in your work, right? Mo, you were going to say something.
Oh, I can totally vouch for that. And I wish that it happened a little sooner, for my for my cortisol level. But and uh, yeah, you have to be able to pivot as a performer and track a lot of things just around me in the space, but also like on the tech table side of things and the director's table side of things, they're tracking a lot of stuff too. So that's all these other layers, that I'm, as a performer, I'm not necessarily aware of because I can't often see the screen. So, but the text is yeah, I don't get too precious about memorizing everything dead letter perfect until, like dress rehearsal, maybe. I do my best, but
I thought you were going to say like the second or third show is when it
well,
starts.
that's usually when I'm able to do it.
I have to say, Moe, I think we should do a big sort of confab of Theater Me Too and the builders, and they'll be like camps because there's company members who are like, why don't we have the text earlier? And company members who are like, not yet, not yet. So
Right.
you'll all form camps and
Yeah.
and I actually don't know this. I'm surprised I don't know this. Do you work with in-ears or you are memorizing the text fully?
Sometimes we have worked with in-ears, but not in a long time. I just
Okay.
memorize it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is such a good old tool. I feel like
Right.
it's so funny. We were working on a piece with Me Too, and we were like the in ear, and one of our performers was like, I could just memorize this part. We were like, that,
Hmm.
yes, genius invention.
But
Um,
ironically, it's sort of like the experience of performing is actually sort of a reverse in ear. So instead of hearing what I'm about to say, I hear in the room what I've just said. So it's like
uh,
a crazy, like I have to just really listen to my inner voice and not hear what's around me, but also be aware of what's around me. And it's just like, okay, whatever. I, I do my best.
well, that actually bridges to the next question I have, which is one of my other hats here at NYU is that I head something called the Innovation Studio, and it's a training space for multidisciplinary artists to look at performance and technology and to really look at it holistically rather than this first, this second, this supports, but really as a practice. And I teach you all to our students. We cover the builder's work and we look at the work. I was sharing earlier that we look at your book, which if folks who are listening haven't seen, this is an incredible book. And one of the frames that I offer, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this, is the idea of looking at technology not simply as a tool, but actually as a collaborator, under the idea that you can engage it as part of the process in a way that creates at its best a kind of feedback loop, right? That it's telling you something and you're reacting and it's telling you something. Now, acknowledging that there's a lot of ways to engage in technology, but the experiences that I've had in seeing you all work in our space, there's this really, and I mean this at the highest level compliment, there's this sense of play with technology where you both totally know what you're doing and don't, like you actually want it to respond in some ways. And so it really does feel laboratory wise, right? Instead of we're going to make it do this, right? Which is a much more kind of direct. And I'm just wondering, both in the process and also Mo in performance, right? How that plays out with this idea, or even when you think of the framework of technology as a collaborator.
I can say a couple of things. Yeah, I was just thinking this morning, I was thinking back to like in doing a show in Zurich in 1995 and arguing the hell out of why there had to be screens on stage. And it was just this, it was like a paradigm shift that could not be, broached, because the actors kept saying they're going to be looking at the screens. They're not going to look at me. And that was like the big, now it's like de rigueur, you have to have a screen on every Broadway stage and it's just like meaningless. But at the time it had great meaning. And I still think it does, in the way that, so obviously we moved beyond having just a screen on stage, and now we have like multiple layers of media, including the second screen on the phone. But the thing that remains the same is we're kind of staging technology. We're staging the power of it, and we're also using technology to talk about technology and critique it, as you say, through the form and content. So there's it's kind of like choreographing a network is how I always think of it, rather than it being just like, and now we're going to slap on a specific technology. But the other thing I want to say real quick is that I think the other thing that's come into focus is that we found some ways to use technology to create community instead of just being a staging critique. So in the last show in Atlas Drug, there was this really simple thing where the audience did a kind of fake questionnaire, like a political profile questionnaire, and then they got dumped into a chat room with their group of like-minded people, and that people loved it. They loved being in a chat room in the theater, and in the theater, like nobody likes it in real life. So I think and it was very surprising, because I was like, I would rather die than like sit in the theater and talk to a bunch of strangers. But I think that there was that moment where the network kind of left the stage and went out into the audience. That was like a community building aspect of it.
But
Yeah.
also like right on the pulse of the moment, like 50% of the conversation in the chat room was people trying to figure out whether they were actually chatting to other audience members or whether they were chatting to AIs that we had set up.
That, I mean, I love that, right? Because for a moment, I think the idea that you would set multi AIs to be in conversation with audiences would be actually an incredible. Thanks for the credit on that. That would be amazing to figure that out. But you're right? There's a kind of instability to that engagement that brings the question of, is this pre-planned? Is this prepared? But I love thinking of it through that lens of community. And in performance mode, how does that play out in terms of technology? Because to me, it feels so alive, right? It's not something in the background. As you're saying, you have to be aware of the wholeness of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but I consider the technology to be another actor on stage with me. And not only is it an actor, but it's a big, fabulous drag queen. And you just got to stay out of the way of that lady and let her do what she's going to do. Like, don't push back on that, because that's just going to make me look bad. So,
Right.
yeah, it, it, and I can't see what the audience is seeing, right? So
Uh-huh.
many times, like being in a film, I have to do something technically that doesn't, I don't have a motivation for it, sort of more um, regular acting terms, but because there's a camera on me, so I have to have an eye line, and sometimes the eye line is like crazy. I'm looking, or I have to
Mhm.
frame myself in a camera that's very far away, but I can't see what the result of that is. So I have to rely on Marianne and James and, Jennifer and everybody else on that side to see the whole picture, because that's I'm part of a composition.
Right,
Um,
right.
so it's
And
always
Mo is virtuosic at that, I feel like the like just we've talked twice about like versions of this, and it's like Mo, you're with us at the table, and then it's like bungee jumping, like then you go, then
yeah,
you're on the other side,
a
and you have to like
catapult.
trust. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
And Mel, how much do you think that's in, I mean, I'm sort of pointing the question, so I apologize, but how much do you think is informed by you as a co-creator of it, right? In other words, you're not coming in after the whole cake is baked and being placed in the middle, right? You're
Right.
actually, as James says, at the table, and then you bungee into the madness of it. How does that affect or give some grounding to that performance?
Um, Well, gosh, it informs me so much because I've watched all of the steps that we've gone through, the iterations we've tried and set aside, the things that we've said, okay, but there's that one little moment, let's
Right.
hold on to that, put it back in, So I have all that background in me too, just like James and Marianne and the rest of the collaborative team. So it's way richer. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, I feel sorry for people who kind of, if we work with someone new and we put them, into our chaos, like, you know, just be calm and, wait. There's a lot of waiting
Right.
for a decision to be made outside of me. So, and I can also inform from what's going on inside too. Um, and Atlas Drugged was, I mean, I'm always in the machine of the
Hmm.
show, but in this one, I was really in the machine. I felt like I was, the machine was in me actually, right? Because this AI was being infused into me, and then I was spitting out words, right? So there was yeah, it felt way more confined up there physically for me. Uh, so,
Yeah. I just want to footnote how amazing the image of the incredible drag queen that technology is. That's such an that will forever stay with me because there is actually, I mean, I have seen these amazing drag performances where somebody's trying to compete with this fabulous drag queen, and you're just going to lose. You're just going to lose, right? But there's that really savvy person who's like, "Oh no, I'm with you," and then it shines the whole thing. And so that is such a vibrant kind of. Um, Collaboration because it is, fabulous and a little bit tempestuous and a little smartass and a little sharp and a little embracing, like all those things. So I appreciate that so much. But it lands, it lands, of course, on Atlas Drugged, and as you mentioned, the machine Mo, I think, I've had the great joy over the few years, the last few years, to see the company's work, whether it's Elements of Oz, which I still cite as one of the most important works that I have experienced as an artist. It really was.
hmm,
Through I Agreed to the Terms, which come on, like we're sitting, you know, thinking about Mechanical Turks, and then I'm becoming one. I'm like, what? I'm in this, right? In a really unique way. And then, of course, to Atlas Shrugged, and I think that I'll use the metaphor of the machine, which I feel like certainly the work is more than a machine, but to feel that I'm observing a machine, to I agree to the terms being part of the machine, right? And in this, it was different in that I really felt it being again progressively plugged more into the machine until you became part of it. And so before we talk a little more specific about Atlas Drug, I'm looking at the whole of the work, and I feel like the work that has come before has informed the next one, has informed the next one. And so, and I recognize this is too simplistic to think in this way, but I feel like there's something that's being worked out that then possibly gets explored deeper or resolved in the next one and resolved in the next one. And I'm wondering about that journey, if that's in fact a fair assessment versus, we did a show, all that's done. Next show, new idea, all that's done. Next show, new idea. Which doesn't seem to be to me the map that I see when I see the work. And I'm wondering how much of the previous works come into the conversation of the process. Is it what we did before? Let's explore that deeper. Or let's not. The dramaturgy of that piece should challenge this one, or is it a much more organic relationship from piece to piece?
I think that it's kind of both. Of course, we like to make it as absolutely as difficult as possible. So we start from scratch as if we've never made a piece before. And it is like, so it's because we're kind of trying to find the form to express the content of each project. But that said, I do think that there is, like, the phones became a kind of dramaturgical through line for the last few shows, the development of that as a second screen and then as a kind of participatory tool. So in that way, it has kind of deepened. I mean, when we did Elements of Oz, it wasn't just simply AR, people looking at flying monkeys and growing poppies, and it was very pleasurable, but kind of and super fun, but like a surface level. And then the shows since then, we did Decameron, where the phones reflected these kind of empty space cities around the world while we were talking about them. And then I agree to the terms. People had to use their phones to work in the show. And then obviously in this project, they were using their phones to tune the candidate. So that is like a strangely coherent through line, I would say. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, that and also there's like, it's almost as if like each show we're like, yeah, we have a new idea that's different, and then we figure out that there are these continuities, and so at least as far back as House Divided, there's this theme developing of technology and economic systems, right? So like that piece was the Grapes of Wrath, but it was also about the 2008 housing crisis, which is obviously like the result of tech, mixed into the economic system, into capitalism, and into the markets. And then, and Alan Greenspan shows up as a character in that, which is like foreshadowing of Ayn Rand to come. He was an
Right.
acolyte of Ayn Rand's. He was like a student of Ayn Rand's, was part of her weird cult. And yeah, and then I agree to the terms. It's obviously another different interrogation of money and the economic system and technology, and so I think that's something too, that's like the threads are connected, even when we think, oh yeah, this is a totally different thing, and then as we start to work on it, we just find these themes that have grown in interest and in research over the course of the company. Oh, and also, sorry, I just want to say too about Oz. One of the things about Elements of Oz is silver and gold, and that the crackpot theory that the yellow brick road represents the gold standard, and the Cowardly Lion is William Jennings Bryan. So like there's like, even in that, even in the Phantasmagoria, which is like the Depression era spectacle as a relief from economic misery, there's
Yeah.
this threads on that.
That's such a to hear both of those kind of line throughs, right? There's such an exciting connection because it does feel like Builders has this uncanny ability of almost rebuilding the instrument and then retuning it, right? So my experience as an audience is this is a complete new work. So I think I fall to the same sort of illusion as you're saying, Rand, of the Builders at the beginning, which I'm like, this is brand new. But then it does become a sort of the parts of the instrument become recognizable. They're just in different places. And so to hear these articulations from Oz through this is it's super moving just to see that journey, because it does feel like an ongoing conversation, right, with the Builders, which is to me what's most moving. If I may lean into the possibly sort of headiest part of it in terms of Atlas Drugged, which is, there's this I just am obsessed with you all's work, because I personally find it very difficult to navigate this, and it has to do with these really heavy and, dare I say, sort of heady considerations, right? So there's a way that I could look at Atlas Drugged which travels us through, I would propose, these kind of three ongoing elements, right? There's a narrative of this individual on stage that's making this sort of deal with the devil, this sort of Faustian idea of, I'm going to be part of this experiment, mom, I don't know what this is, right? So there's something very human about it. Then there's this layer of the game show quality, right? And then there's this multiple interactivity thing that's happening with us as an audience, right? So that's a very sort of clumsy framework of that. But in the process of that, for me at least, there's this really heavy conversation around techno optimism, this idea that technology is going to fix everything. Then there's this strong strain of techno nihilism, which is technology is going to destroy everything. So it becomes a political conversation. And then here's the killer, there's a huge sense of humor about it. This is where my head explodes, right? Which is, there's a way that I can imagine, if I describe to somebody, oh, I saw a piece and it was about the tension between techno optimism, techno nihilism, politics, they'd be like, ooh, that sounds heavy. I laughed my ass off, right? And had moments of deep consideration and reflection. So it isn't a comedy by any means, but there's this incredible strain of humor, and it's not just to make the sort of bitter pill swallowable. It's doing something else. And so my question is, how the hell how the hell does the dramaturgy support these strains of humor amidst these big conversations? I hope that question makes sense, because it's a big one.
I mean, that's so perceptive. It's wonderful, Ruben. My God, you really did see the show. Um, I think that, I mean, I will speak from the inside. I think that one of the things that happens in an ensemble project process is whoever gets a laugh in the room, it's like it feeds the work. Do you know what I mean? Not that they're trying to, but the being in the space, swimming in that water and then being able to joke about it in real time, I think is really important. And so, like Mo especially has an amazing sense of humor, and she's always cracking jokes. So some of those just get folded back into the everyday fabric of rehearsal.
Mm.
That's part of what it is the social aspect. And then the other thing is James is like a comedy writer. I just couldn't believe how many jokes were in the show. So James, tell us about your secret life as a comedian.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, it's like it's new for me to like trust that, actually, to like to want to pursue that and trust it in writing. So Atlas Shrugged was it was kind of like exercising a new muscle, and like it's addictive, of course. Like people talk about chasing the laugh like as a warning, but I actually think, right, when the materials is dark, you really need it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I mean, and that was really fun to like, okay, like relax and like go like lean into that. And then also I think this is I don't I don't want to start a yet another war of generations, but like I think this is so somewhat of like a Gen X thing, is like cynical humor, like finding the laugh in the darkness is natural.
Yeah.
That's what in the 90s, that's what we all did. So in some ways that like finding the lightness in the dark and like surviving the dark by laughing about it is like the soup that we grew up in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Mo, sorry.
No, the only other thing I would add to that is, we can say a lot more um, when people are laughing,
Mm.
than giving them, the medicine. You know what I mean? We're the spoonful of sugar. So,
I, I mean, it's hard to deny that, right? Again, I mentioned, optimism, nihilism, all these things, right? But at the center of this sits Ayn Rand, right, as a
yeah.
consideration. And in many ways, with all its problematics and challenges, there are strains of humor, perhaps tongue in cheek, in that work, or irony, or a kind of reflected cynicism in that. Um, is that part of it also, to find? You're naming that the a lot of those constraints comes from the company work, James, as you mentioned, the pursuit of that. But is it also about that? I'll call it source material, for lack of a better word, of sort of finding it there, sort of part of what's in the room.
Are you saying Ayn Rand had a sense of humor?
Well, I don't know that I'm saying Ayn Rand had a sense of humor. Perhaps I'm saying that I encounter the work, and as it reads, and it might be, James, my Gen X lens, that I find certain elements of it not quite humorous, but there's something about it that sparks a kind of in me that I think can be strained into that. But I'm wondering if that's part of it, or if that's pushing back on the material, or how that source material
Yeah,
refracts.
yeah. I think that the absurdism of her work definitely lends itself to extrapolation.
Yeah.
You know, she was a big Benzedrine user, and that's why there's like a 60-page speech in Atlas Shrugged, and yeah, she just had a lot to say. So I think in that it's fun to unpack it because it's just like that John Galt, what? You know, they're all larger than life. It meant to be in her pantheon, right? But I think that the thing that obviously what we were using Ayn Rand for was to show how she became a kind of figurehead for the Silicon Valley, you know, culture of greed and this idea of
Right.
the virtue of selfishness and that valorizing winners as heroes. That was a huge part of her project. And you know, the oligarchy definitely leaned into that and ran with it. So that's so funny, ultimately.
And if I may, just only because when you asked if I thought I meant had a sense of humor, I couldn't tell if it's because you and I are the only ones who do, or because you were like, she absolutely does not. um, uh, what are your thoughts about that source material? And I mean, you just mentioned the humor of the absurdity, but do you feel like there's a sense of humor in any of that? A conscious one?
Moe was really the kind of biographical keeper of Ayn Rand. So, I mean, what do you think?
Well, in her work life, I would say she she really everything is very serious. You know, it's very
Uh-huh.
serious, right? And she wants to be taken seriously, and she wants to be a philosopher, right? Um, but in her personal life, she, you know, she was just like anybody else, and she liked music and she liked tap dancing and, you know, like did these little routines where she would put on a song and pretend to tap, you know. I mean, it's so complicated. And I don't know, like sometimes the humor now in it in the work to me seems camp almost, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so strident and, you know, almost Stalinist in the tone, although she's probably rolling in her grave to hear that now. But you know, yeah, there's not much humor in there. You know, she doesn't want
Yeah.
to. She didn't want to undermine her cred, I think.
Yeah, but what's interesting, and I'll move away from the humor conversation in a moment. But what's what's interesting is, again, I think from Oz all the way through this work, is the builder's really uncanny ability, at least in my view, to not make fun of that. In other words, at no point did I feel we may be laughing at the absurdities or those contradictions, Mother, you're talking about, but in many ways, there's a way in which you could just make fun of Iran and how, you know, ridiculous or those rants or whatever. And there's a kind of cruelty to that that will make us laugh, and that is not at all present. It feels like we're in a different point of view from that one,
Mm.
and that, I find that to be really difficult with something that actually is rife with contradictions that could be laughable. I
Yep.
think James, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the well, one thing I was going to say is I think also that the not only the this is taking the conversation back a step, but the oligarchy, you know, revering Ayn Rand, but her obsession with like makers, you know, and
Mhm.
that fits in to like where we are right now, like that, you
Mm.
know, like Elon Musk and these people who are sort of crashing through the government, you know, those people believe that they know better, that engineers know better
Yeah.
than politicians or sociologists or academics, and that they just have to you know move fast, break things, you know, start over, build a new society. And that stuff is Gulch. That's like in Atlas Shrugged, you know, so there's like this, you know, people can argue like, well, this one's not a true Randian because, you know, that she believed in in the absolute free market. Like there's all these like asterisks of like, you know, making these
Mhm.
arguments, but like this basic idea, the valorization of this kind of macho, you know, culture of like makers as being superior to the rest of us, that that cruelty is like at the heart of her work. And so the I think that's part of the, part of the laugh is like Mo was saying, it's so strident, it's so self-serious, and it's so like the characters are so big and one-dimensional, But then, right, I mean, we're not just laughing at her because those ideas are part of like what's going on in the world right now, like the what's going wrong in the world right now. So part of our interest, our real interest in Ayn Rand is not just like her Ayn Rand herself, the kook, but also like that her influence is still so powerful in the culture.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because then you literally manifested in an experiential way for the audience, and this brings me to my last sort of point and question is, which is about not just audience engagement but audience interactivity, right? That all of a sudden, as you were mentioning there, and we are with the phone, and we are now voting on investment. Really, is what's happening, right? I mean, we are putting our sort of imaginary money where our mouth is, and then seeing the impact we're having. So all of a sudden the sort of Ayn Rand, or oligarchy, all that is really manifest in the room, and we are there's it all comes into play, and humor and the irony of it and the game, right? But it's really direct, and it's the ask was so light. In other words, take your phone out, press switch, and by like the third time I was like, how do I spend my like it's asking this massive question of our own day-to-day participation, right? And so I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about that, either the impact, the discovery of that, or your interest in that. Um, Again, interactivity, and Mary, I appreciate you noting that growth from or that development from Oz, which was this gorgeous experience. I mean, my phone was a wonder lens for that. Into this, which felt really different and much more real, dare I say?
Yeah,
Um,
more instrumental.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to let James talk about the development of the game because it was really his baby. But the way that we wanted to end it was that there would be two endings because it was fucking 10 days before the election, and everyone was in this suspended
Mm,
state of anxiety, beyond belief. And so that was kind of what we wanted to get across was what it means to exist in that space of
mhm.
unknowing, and just like trying to live with the vast difference between those two endings. So what did the game do, James?
Yeah, well, no, I think Ruben, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the biggest push in the game was to make the audience complicit, and to to bring them in so they weren't just observers in the economics and the politics of this, and so yeah, that's the major thing. I think the other thing is all of us were talking about using the phones to vote. I mean, we were aware from pretty early on of roughly the timing of when this premiere would be and election, and wanted to do that, and looked did some research on other shows that have involved voting and selecting things. And so, we were looking for what we could do that was new and it was tied a little more closely to the themes of the show beyond just vote for your candidate. And so that's where the idea of investing your money and having the investing your money influence the outcome of the election came into play because obviously post, Citizens United, those things have as big an impact on our elections as individuals in the booth. So yeah, so it's that. I mean, this is awareness too of like everybody who, even people who don't really, they don't tend to think of themselves as like movers and shakers of Silicon Valley, but like where is their 401k getting invested, and are they paying attention to that?
That's right. That's yeah. That was. I mean, I have to say that was on a personal kind of reflection is that realization as I used my phone for the second or third time, as I walked out of the theater, wasn't one of defeat. It actually felt a kind of, I don't want to say empowerment, that's almost too clear. I didn't have that clarity, but I felt like, right, we make choices. We make choices. Like in the middle of an uncertainty, the upside down world, we do make choices, right? And it really has stayed with me as a really central, not even question, but a kind of a big reaffirmation of something that we know, and to play it out. But as Mo said, it's like I took the spoonful because there was this game show, and I was like, okay, this is wacky. And then I realized, wait, what are we investing? And most of us are, at least in my audience, seem to be more concerned about the making of the money versus what your support, what's happening, right? And so the sort of the snake started eating its own tail, and I was like, no, 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 which was such a brilliant dramaturgy to the piece.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah.
interesting to note that I think the first night, when everyone does their phone thing at the beginning, and then they're divided up, and like you're a Kermit, you're a QAnon shaman, you're a Elon Musk, whatever. That it was vast majority Kermits because, and Kermit is Kermit social? No, that's AOC. What's Kermit? Kermit is not social justice warrior, but
Friendly social something. I
yeah,
can't even remember.
me neither. But basically, the
Oh, man.
kind-hearted one who wants to make the whole thing work, right?
Mhm.
And but then at the end, that is not how people spent their money. They just wanted to make money in the show, and so we had evil ending.
The
Right,
So
right.
Kermit's voted the evil ending in.
Social guardians. That's
social
what
guardians,
Kermits were.
that's it. Yeah.
Even the language of it. I mean, but this is what I mean. It's so successful, right? So that what I think moves me and I think inspires us as Theater Me Too to see the work of builders is about making work that actually really manifests the tensions in the conversation, that there isn't a didactic, this is the story of, or this is what we think about, or this is how you should think about, which I recognize is a really valid journey for other artists. But to see the builders say, these are the tensions, and then little by little, those tensions move above me. And the realization is I am in the middle of these tensions in my everyday, right? So there's a kind of a softness actually to the dramaturgy, even though the work is sharp. And I felt that with, I agree to the terms. I felt it in a different way with us, but to feel it in this way, in this political moment, in this technological moment, actually, it brought up so many questions and impacted, again, me and my day to day. But on a selfish note, we had a development laboratory with Me Too, and we walked in and we were like, before we do anything, I mean, the whole company went to see it. We were like, we must talk through Atlas Drug. I mean, we literally are talking about all these elements. And for us, actually, we land in a different conversation also about literacy, about technology literacy, right? And the illiteracy that is promoted and the lack of power that gives that, we don't understand. My mother doesn't understand how this works, yet it's essential to her life. And that's by design, that she doesn't have literacy. My father, who is a mechanic, can't open and fix this. He's opened and fixed everything in his life, but less and less is that possible. And so it sent us into a whole conversation about that, if in fact agency is part of it. So I felt truly inspired and grateful to be a part of that audience. It's not even about watching it, it's about being a part of that experience in that moment. I fear we are at our time. But what a delight to sit in conversation with you all.
Yeah.
It will have to continue over drinks at some point soon. I hope next time you all are at Me Too.
Yeah.
But what a exciting thing to have Atlas Drug premiere at the Skirball, and to have our community at NYU be a part of experiencing it. So thank you. Any parting thoughts before we head out?
I'm going to
Well,
get you
just
to write that down. I have to get you to write that down about tensions, because I think that's brilliant. That's a brilliant way of thinking about it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, what you were describing is like it's a description of feeling what it's like to be a part, a node on a network, as opposed to being an atomized individual, which is just a wonderful idea for our ideal audience member and their experience.
Mm.
And yeah, and then to your closing, of course, thank you to this girl, and thank you, Ruben.
Yeah. Thanks, Ruben.
Yeah,
Really.
thanks, Ruben. We got a lot of NYU between us, don't we?
We sure do. Well, we'll keep keeping that at NYU. So thank you again so much, and we will pause here. So thanks so
Okay,
much, and
Thank
we'll
you.
stick around.
thanks.
Okay, thanks,
All right.
folks.